Superintendent of Schools for Amity, Chip Demai. He's got members of his team here. You want to just introduce your...
Call the meeting to order. We're in a new meeting.
Okay. They just called the meeting to order. Chip, why don't you just introduce your Terry, Marie, and Jamie?
Sure. The Director of Curriculum, Marie McPadden, he's here this evening, part of our team. Jack Levine, Director of Finance and Administration. The Assistant Director of Finance and Administration, Terry Loomis. And we have one of our board members here, so Jamie Sterling here, supporting the Amity Board of Education.
And Chairman of the Finance Committee.
Chairman of the Finance Committee. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I really see it as that. I think that I've modified the presentation slightly, so we'll get to really most of the highlights and then be more than glad to answer questions. The question piece is not just for tonight. I think what we've tried to do is throughout the process, we've tried really to extend the process to allow for questions to develop as the process goes on. And then what we've done is, if you take a look at the document that you have in front of you, this, may I pick up yours? Sure. The yellow cover is different than the white cover. The white cover was our first issue. But what we've done is we've included not just the numbers, but some definitions in the history and some other pieces that are explanations in here. And the buff-colored sheets at the beginning are the memo that accompanied this piece, which represents answers to questions that came up since the first time that we presented. So that's really the way we've been operating. As we get questions, we'll put them together, and in the next presentation, we'll make sure that they become part of that public conversation. I'd like to start just as a reminder with the mission statement. Everything that we do at the Amity School District is driven by this statement. We're here to enable every Amity student to become a lifelong learner, literate, caring, creative, and effective world citizen. And that drives all the work that we do. It drives the goals, and the goals also are part of this. The Board of Education, of course, is made up from members from each of the member towns. Being a regional district, Amity has a finance committee. The finance committee is represented by members of the Amity Board of Education, as well as members from the boards of finance from the 3 member towns. I've included the board and district goals, which are also in the document, so of course I won't go through them, but I put them here as a reminder that this really is an educational plan, and it's the funding part of an educational plan. And we work hard to make sure that the requests that we make are tied directly to the implementation of the district goals. The last year has been a really fantastic one for the Amity Regional School District. This is the emblem for the National Blue Ribbon Schools Award. So in the past year, the high school has received the Blue Ribbon Award. In addition to the Blue Ribbon Award, recognitions from the Connecticut State Department of Education for a School of Distinction, Newsweek as a top high school, Washington Post as a most challenging high school. So the really interesting thing here, and we're not just saying it, it's really important to us. You know, a lot of recognitions go to the high school level. There's graduation, and there's a whole bunch of other things. And I think that we do a good job of recognizing that this doesn't happen without a solid foundation, K-6, strong development in the middle schools. And of course, we have 2 middle schools that take 3 very different communities and bring them together at the high school and end up with amazing results. So we do recognize that it's really the work of the 3 towns that produces a student body and a parent support base and a community support base that brings us to a place where we get these types of awards and recognitions. When we do comparisons, you know, one of the things that we're doing is we're refining our presentation. And so as I go through this, I'll show you how we're going to refine it in the future. But one of the things that we do is we compare ourselves to the DERG schools, the demographic reference groups, And for Durg B, that's the map of Connecticut, and those are the schools. So they include towns like Newtown and Monroe and Trumbull, as well as Greenwich and Guilford and Madison and Granby and Avon. Currently, we have information from all but 2 of those school districts, and the average superintendent's requested increase in those 19 towns is just over 3%. We are not. Graduation rates. This graph, the red line on the bottom represents the state graduation rate. The blue line represents where Amity is. The green line represents those Durg schools again. So there are 19 towns, but there are really 21 schools because you've got 2 of those towns that have multiple high schools. And the shaded region and those vertical bars represent the extent of the Durg. So we're above average in our Durg. And the latest one, 97.3%. The state has changed the way that they calculate graduation rates. So it's a little bit more normalized. It takes into account 4 years and a whole bunch of other things. That 97.3 is really good. Our SAT scores, the SAT has changed. And if you're a parent and you have kids that are in the schools, you know that the SAT has changed once again. Not with this current administration, but the next one will be significantly different. But the scoring has changed from a total of 1,600 points to 2,400 points. The vertical bars, the black bars, represent the Durg again. The green dots represent the average of the Durg, and the blue dots are us. So, again, above average in this group of schools that we commonly compare ourselves to. The 8 or 9 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, Amity really started to put a focus on making sure that our results on the CAP test improved. They were not in a good place in the Durg. The Durg, again, the black vertical bars are the extent of the Durg, and our scores are given by the vertical bars in math, science, and reading and writing. The last one, 2014, a new test has replaced CAP. It's called SBAC in Connecticut. And so the only CAP test that's offered at the high school level is science. And you can see that our scores are well above average in the Durg and for the most part increasing just about every year. If we take a look at CMT scores, essentially the equivalent of the CAP at the middle school level, again in 2014 replaced by SBAC, so there's only science, you see a general increasing trend and better performance in the Durg from year to year. In addition to academics, Amity is very proud of the fact that we have that triad of academics, athletics, and the arts. In athletics, I didn't list them all here. It gave you a little sampling. The number of students that we have that are either all-state or all-American. We actually this fall have a coach. Our cross-country coach is an all-American, is a national coach of the year. So. Athletics, our kids do very, very well. One of the things here, and again, we focus on high school because that's where most of the competitive athletics take place, but we have over 60% of our students at the middle school level that are participating in athletics as well. In the arts, whether they be the visual arts or the performing arts, we have at the middle school and the high school level, our musical performances are always award-winning. The show, and if you haven't gotten tickets for Tarzan, you are running short on time. You'll definitely want to do that. And somebody's going to be swinging. We have flyers. We have flyers. So I've asked a couple of times and they haven't taken me up on it. So we'll see what happens. If we go beyond academics and athletics and the arts just to what our kids do in the community, this is a partial list of some of those things that our students are participating in terms of service in the community. Operations are an important part, especially when it comes to budgeting, because we've demonstrated a lot of areas in which we're highly efficient. And I just wanted to give you a couple examples of how we go about saving money or adding some efficiency to our programs or our operations. Returning students from external placements. Amity has a very good reputation for properly placing students when they've been identified as special education. And when we can meet their needs here and provide services, we do. And that is one of those elements we get farther in the presentation. We're going to talk about risk. And I think we have a pretty good history of bringing kids back and making them part of the Amity school system as opposed to being outplaced. You know, for some of those things with special ed, now we share transportation in the 3 towns for regular ed, but every once in a while, one of the expensive pieces of having an outplaced student is the cost of transportation. So when we have an opportunity to share transportation costs with other towns, we go ahead and do that and save a significant amount of money for the towns. We've implemented complimentary observers. We have, as the state has changed their teacher evaluation model, we've gone ahead and changed ours. And the reason that this is on here is it is an exemplar for the state. There aren't a whole lot of towns that are doing it or school districts, and we have a system that works very well. The professional development minimum days. There are 4 days in the schedule that either are late opening or an early release. And the best thing that has happened this year with those days is a large amount of vertical articulation, of making sure that what we're doing across schools and the grade levels. Our next step is to continue our extension into K-6 with that type of articulation. We're doing it outside of those professional days, but the calendars that have just been approved by all 3 towns have some consistent professional development next year, which will allow us to do more of that K-12. We're very proud of that. In operations, the Amity has been identified a couple of years ago as one of the fully efficient school districts in Connecticut by the University of Connecticut, and 5 consecutive clean audits. That in itself would be a fantastic feat. When you add the next 2 lines, no recommendations for improving operations, none. We're in a good position financially. Facilities. This past summer we hosted the Woodbridge Summer Camp, and coming up this coming summer, I spoke with Guy today, and we'll be doing the same thing. So we'll be hosting summer programs on the high school campus. We've taken advantage of grants to enhance our security, as well as, and it'll be on the next page, our technology. Well, there you go, technology. So the infrastructure was a $186,000 state grant. We do have a new phone system. The Power School. Now, Power School, not just implementing it is important, but implementing it in the context of each of the 3 member towns use it at the elementary level. So now transferring information on students just becomes simpler. And alert solutions. So again, if you're a parent or a community member who receives snow calls and gets to hear my voice at 5:30 in the morning telling you that school's been delayed or canceled, that's because of alert solutions. So now, getting into some of the numbers. If you take a look at the 6-year history here, the yellow lines are what was initially presented by the superintendent for a budget, and the black bars are what the final budget was for each of those times. And one of the pieces is, well, you look to the right and you go, holy cow, the last couple of years they've really been higher than the 4 years before. One of the things that the district has done very, very well is taking advantage of efficiencies. And so there are only so many times that you can change an electrical system and get efficiencies from that. That you can have a very successful negotiation with Anthem. Those things are not necessarily things that can happen every year. And I think we've done a good job of taking advantage of all those opportunities. That line that goes across is not only the average in the state across that time, but it happens to be our average. We're pretty close to the average. This is a book about learning, and the reason I've included it in here is part of our philosophy in the process is to open it up and show how we've made some of the decisions so that there is more clarity on the thought process that's gone into them and not just the numbers. So the process starts with us making sure that we're meeting all the mandates that the state and the federal government have put out, maintain those strong programs, and at the same time limit or restrain those costs that limit the impact on taxpayers in each of the towns. We begin in the summer with the budget development process. It's a collaborative process that this year took an extra step in that collaboration. In the past, the superintendent would meet with each of the department heads, meaning the heads of the district departments and the principals. This year, we had a meeting all together at the end of that, so that there's a significant amount of ownership in this budget from school to school. There's a systemic picture of where we're spending our money. It goes ahead and is presented to the Amity Finance Committee, the Amity Board of Education, and the communities. So tonight is my first community presentation, formal community presentation. We've been out in the towns in other contexts, answering questions and meeting with people. And over the next couple weeks, I will travel also to Orange and Bethany. And then the Board of Ed and the Finance Committee will reconsider it again on March 9th, I believe. So our first presentation of the process of the budget was at the beginning of January. That's why the date there is January 12th, and that's the book that you see right now. We've tried to organize the book so that it's helpful for somebody who wants to dive deeper into the budget. And one of the pieces you'll see at the end is that the budget detail is done twice. And it's done twice so that one is in order by is it site, and the other is in order by function? Site and function. So here's where we are. So today is the 19th, and we're in Woodbridge, and those are the dates of the meetings that we'll have coming up. The elections in Woodbridge pushed the referendum back a day, so that's actually going to be on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday as it normally is. Overall, this budget, just over 52% comes from salaries. We did recently negotiate with the largest bargaining unit, the teachers, and reached an agreement with the teachers that makes some significant modifications in the health plan and ends up being a salary increase over the 3 years that comes out to about 9.44% over the 3 years. That's not a real graph. Well, I mean, it's a real graph, but it's not based on real data. But the point here is our goal, whether it be the medical reserve, whether it be facilities, whether it be technology, is really what we're trying to do. Let me give you an example. When I get to this later, you're probably aware that in many of the years that have preceded this, including this year, part of the budget from last year has been applied to a subsequent year. So applying money from a previous year to this current year's budget changes the allocation that the towns have, because that goes in as revenue. And so the allocation from the town goes up and down depending on how much money we move forward. One of our goals is to try to get that money that's moved forward to a subsequent year down to zero. But we can't do it cold turkey, because if we do that immediately, last year was $260,000 or so, that significantly increases the town contributions because of the revenue drop. So this year we've advanced $100,000. $100,000? $150,000. So we're taking steps towards bringing that down. And I say that in the context of this graph because our goal is to try to even out some of those peaks and troughs. Last year, this current year, facilities, zero. Zero? This year, zero. Having a year where facilities has a $0 budget means that some other year has to be huge. We're trying to balance that out, balance out facilities, balance out technology, and get to a place where originally we had picked 25% as what we thought was optimal for a reserve in the medical account. What we've heard in talking with some of the towns and some of the boards of finance is that 25% might be a little bit aggressive. So we've backed it off to 20% as the target that we're moving towards. Here's an interesting variable. In the past, we've taken loans from the state for construction, and when you refinance some of your debt, and the state would like their piece of that refinancing. So we have a potential $145,000 estimated what we owe the state out there. The state doesn't do a very good job of keeping track and asking for this. And when we ask, we get different answers. So right now, that's why it says the year 2099. It's just out there. We don't know when it's going to be, but it's a potential that you should be aware of. One of the big parts of this budget is recognizing that there are elements in there that are associated with value. Do we want to add a program? Do we want to purchase texts? And there are other pieces that are associated with risk that we can't simply eliminate, but we have to make a decision about. So special education grants. The reimbursement rate from the state changes each year, and unfortunately, it's reported to us after the budget has been developed. That's a risk. We have to take a guess. Turnover savings. How many people are going to change positions, retire? We don't know. The vacancy factor. If somebody happens to be on a long-term leave and we're able to use a sub to replace them for a period of time, we pick up savings from the vacancy factor. Medical and dental insurance, general liability insurance, special education tuition, and transportation, all variables. The OPEB trust. We do feel an obligation to make sure that we are appropriately funding benefits for our retirees and our future retirees. Our understanding of our obligation to the OPEB trust has changed as we've moved to a self-funded medical insurance. So we're actively working with our actuaries to determine what we should actually be contributing to that fund. And what we found is that it's not 100%. We're trying to figure out exactly what it is. So we're taking some risk there in not funding that this year. And state reimbursements that we just don't know what the rate is. Enrollment in Amity, the top line is K-12. The middle line is the 9-12 high school, and the bottom line is grades 7 and 8. What this shows is we contract with NESDEC, and they give us a prediction that's based on birth rates and permits and in-migration and out-migration of people, and they take a whole bunch of data to determine this. So the vertical bars on here represent their error. They'll tell us that 1% per year is the best that they can do as a prediction. So these bars get a little bit bigger as you move out to the right, and you go out 10 years, and that's 10% variation. So you'll see that there appears as though there would be a decrease in enrollment. This actually is the prediction that we got for enrollment from a year ago. This is one from 2 years prior to that. The reason I put them here and superimpose is that you can see that their predictions in this case have been fairly accurate, and even 2 years out, they're still within those error bars. They didn't do a bad job. And then this happened. So here's the difference. They use a 5-year rolling average, and for the past 7 years, that 5-year rolling average has had about 149 students in this district per 100 births. So that means you've got in-migration of people. In this last 5-year interval, 171 students per 100 births. So that foundational number that they based their predictions on, here's what it looks like. That red line, which is outside of their prediction from even a year ago, is where we are. So enrollments really are not decreasing. Enrollments are really leveling off. So it's something that we'll have to keep a careful eye on in the next couple of years. The average daily membership, the changes from 13-14 to 14-15, Bethany has seen a slight decrease in both the actual number and the overall percentage. Orange has seen a slight decrease in the number, but a slight increase in the overall percentage. And Woodbridge has seen a slight decrease in the actual number and a slight decrease in the actual percentage. So that's what the distribution looks like with the 3 towns. And that other revenue piece includes some funding from the state and also some of that money that we move into a subsequent year. So if you take a look at the entire budget, the budget request that we're putting forward represents an increase of $976,415, which is an overall 2.12% increase. The obligation in terms of each of the towns is listed there, and Woodbridge is at 2.24. Getting back to this piece about planning for the future, one of the ways that we're trying to limit the peaks and troughs that come with trying to plan for facilities and tech is being very clear about the plan moving out 3, 4, or 5 years. And our recommendation is grouping projects that are in facilities that should not be in an operating budget and bonding them. And so that's part of the plan that we've started to develop here. And that's it. Certainly.
So for our,
Shut the stupid fan off.
thank you very much for your presentation, Chip. I'm sure everybody learned something tonight. Are there any questions?
I do have some questions. So with the student enrollment,
Yes.
As you showed the variation and really that it's stabilizing and maybe going up a little bit, what changes have you thought about or had to make in terms of personnel for the school?
Well, that's great. So the original budget that we had presented prior to the this news and the teacher negotiations included a reduction at the high school level of 3 FTEs, 3 full-time equivalents. So 3 full-time equivalents means 5 periods of teaching times 3. Being able to identify where that would be is very difficult until scheduling is completed.
Sure.
So, but we felt pretty confident based on enrollment and class sizes and some of the numbers that we've seen developing over the years that we could probably go ahead and do that, hopefully through some attrition and some rearrangement. What we've done is when those changes were made, we actually went from reducing 3 FTE to reducing just 2 FTE. So that's the modification that we've made, which is a cautious modification because this is only 1 year in the change in the enrollment study. So we're waiting to see what happens and how this develops.
Okay.
So small changes.
And were there any programmatic changes associated with that at all? Or-
No programmatic changes. We haven't. We've added. Included in this is a significant amount of money for textbooks, which in this past year we delayed textbooks and digital resource purchases because the development of the Common Core and making sure that things were consistent. And there were lots of vendors who said, yeah, we're consistent, and they really weren't. But we've gotten to a position now where some of the requirements for, say, social studies has a civics and economics requirement in which we haven't in the past offered economics. So supplementing that, those texts were important. So we do have a large chunk that's associated with text. But as far as specific programs, there are no additional programs, or no reduction for that matter either.
Okay. And from a technology perspective, in terms of what you provide to the students, could you explain that a little bit?
We have had a couple of reductions in there. We're trying to even this out. So what we've done is a classic educational scenario, probably even industry scenario, in which we've extended some of the, if we were going to do a 5-year replacement on some items, we've extended it to a 6-year replacement on some items, or something like that. We are working on developing a bring your own device policy. So instead of focusing on the individual devices that we supply, we're focusing on strengthening the infrastructure so that we can support devices that either students will bring or we can make available.
What percentage of the students bring their own devices? And I assume it's iPads, maybe sometimes laptops. Are there other things?
I think that I'm going to reverse that
Okay.
question just a little bit because I don't, depending upon how much we encourage them to do so or we use it or we have the support, I think we would find that there's a greater number who might have them available. So what we generally ask, because our obligation is to make sure that every student has access to it, is, okay, so who doesn't? And our estimate is that there may be as many as 20% of our students that don't have access to a device.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a couple of questions. So, based on the newest demographic projections, clearly the red line shows that we may at one point need to start to see a larger enrollment. Obviously, handling the high school, you may have a few more years to make your changes than you do at the middle school. And since you handle both, when do you start to look at that more seriously and decide we need to start making changes either to your staff or to, in other words, you see 1 or 2 years of demographic changes and projections that may not make you run out and do something, but 3, 4, at what point do you say we need to start to address this, at least at the middle school level, because it's coming?
Great question. So one of the things that, when we take a look at I like to use the carpool example, in that if there are 4 people in your carpool and one person drops out of your carpool, you can't sell 1/4 of your car. So I think in a lot of scenarios when we're talking about the class sizes and staffing, we're talking more about a step function, which, you know, we have a minimum value that we don't go below, and we have maximum value we won't go above. So in terms of where we are in the middle school, the teams are a really important approach. That's proven very valuable to the success of students at the middle school. So we've been asked to take a look at that and see what would happen if we modified the team approach. So that was part of the process this year, to see if that was an area to squeeze. And you know, we're not in a position where the enrollment is low enough to make it educationally and financially effective to change that team structure. To answer your question, in the other direction, I think that we're probably in the middle of that step. So I think that we could accommodate both a slight decrease and a slight increase without crossing that barrier of having to modify that structure at the middle school.
Okay. And my last question or comment was, I noticed an email that I received saying that you've opened the process of your budget process to all the public to review and to participate in. Is that something that has started with this fiscal year coming up, where you're letting people take a better look and be part of the process if they have come? I noticed that on the email it says you were opening it up to anyone to take a shot at it.
I think we've done that throughout, in that there is a balance between standing on the street corner and talking about the budget, and you know, talking to the financial bodies in the town that do that. So what we've tried to do is start the process earlier, extend the process. As an example, the finance committee meets before the Board of Ed. Therefore, there's a ceiling on how much time really you can discuss. So for January and February, we tried to separate those so that there'd be a greater opportunity. That last email that we sent out was to make sure that people were aware of what our superintendent's recommendation was at this time, and simply continuing to them, or to encourage them to ask any questions they might have about the budget.
Great, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Chip. That was very informative, and I thought breaking out the risk factors was very helpful in thinking about the budget. You mentioned that the school was recognized as a fully efficient school. What does that mean?
A study done at the University of Connecticut took a look at inputs and outputs of the school. So in a truly technical definition of efficient, in terms of, in science, if your inputs and your outputs are the same, then you're 100% efficient. If your inputs are up here and you only get this out, then you're far less efficient. So somebody took a look at a number of factors that you would consider outputs, mostly related to student test scores, and inputs, which were essentially finances. And in their measure, 21 schools in Connecticut came out as top of their scale, and Amity was one.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks, everybody. And so if you think tomorrow of a question, I encourage you to send it to me, please.
Okay,
All right.
thank you very much.
I'm still carrying the plaque, please.
No. That was just for the first meeting.
Tell me. Just quick one thing. I know which one it is.
Turn the lights on?
Yeah, whichever one is out right there. There you go.
Jerry told him to be inside.
Of course. Okay, the next item on our agenda is, I'll take the lead, it's a joint meeting. Tony's report. Tony?
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Our report through January 2015, it's a few highlights for your information. The budgetary result is a budgetary surplus of approximately $200,000 at the end of our fiscal year, which brings our fund balance at about 9.4% of our annual budget. In revenues, the department charges are really the only area we're expected to see a slight surplus, about $40,000. This is mainly due to conveyance fees, town clerk fees, and transfer station fees, which are trending slightly ahead of budget this year. And expenditures, some of your larger variances includes the Board of Selectmen, which has will have a surplus of about $20,000, largely due to a surplus in legal fees in the litigation fees in the Board of Selectmen account. The Country Club of Woodbridge is projected to experience a deficit this year, both in the repair and maintenance line and also in electricity, which is higher than budgeted use. We do, however, have some funding from the operations of the 2014 year from the golf course, which should offset those deficits. The police department has a shortfall in police officers' overtime due to a shortage in personnel and some other issues that we've discussed. There is, however, a surplus in wages, which would more than cover this shortfall, including largely due to a vacant position and due to some injuries that have been taking place. So those surpluses in salaries will help to cover the, and in fact exceed the deficit in overtime. Waste management, there's a surplus of about $40,000, which includes bulky waste disposal of $30,000 and recycling of $10,000. Those are our current estimates on our surpluses. And finally, our employee benefits is projected to experience a surplus of about $100,000. And while we had some shortfalls in workers' compensation and heart and hypertension, which we've discussed previously, there's a surplus in retiree health care of about $75,000 and police retirement of about $70,000. So we've had some favorable coverage changes and coverage drops in health care for retirees, which was a result of that surplus, and police retirement as well. So those are some of our highlights for the current year.
How are we looking in public works with all the
So we're probably over budget. We had a budget of $50,000 for overtime for the year. We're probably close to 80 at this point. So we're over budget by about 30, which is, and in product, we're probably over budget another 20 or so. So I'm hopeful that their department will be able to cover some of that. And what they can't cover, we'll have to use contingency, which is a good reason, a good illustration of why we don't use contingency
Why we have it in the beginning.
in the beginning of the year.
And we're in good shape contingency-wise.
We are.
Oh, yeah.
We're very good shape. Very good shape.
We like to,
So most departments know that we really don't, unless it's something extraordinary, we try not to spend contingency early in the year.
of course, we're talking about a storm now for Saturday night into Sunday.
Rain.
Yeah, it's going to start off as Woodbridge Board of Ed report. Any questions for Tony? Woodbridge Board of Ed, FYI. Looks like we're trending at $66,000. So that might be an opportunity, if that keeps up, for them to fund some of this year's budget.
Yeah.
I mean, next
Right.
year's
Yeah.
budget,
Yeah.
this
Right.
year's surplus.
Yep.
Keep the budget up. Okay. Why don't you take the lead here? You have a funding request, Ellen?
Yes, there's a funding request, 1415-09, in the amount of $23,327.84. Tony, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. This is, we discussed this actually in some detail at the capital budget presentation of the golf course. And if you recall, there were two pumps, irrigation pumps. And while they had advocated replacing both of those because they are beyond their useful life, and I believe one of them is not working, we've decided that we would replace one and hope that the it goes well, right? So
Hope the other one survives.
hopefully, this is the this is the request to fund that replacement, and the funds are from capital projects that have been closed or that have had remaining appropriations on them. So we basically close them for the, and then the funds could be used for other projects.
Thank you. We'll start with the Board of Selectmen. Is there a motion by a Selectman to fund request 141509 in the amount of $23,327.84?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Just hold it up.
Okay. Oh, then you can take it off another time.
I want to see you sign it.
I can't sign it.
Tough crowd.
Jeepers. All these witnesses.
Dave, okay.
You've done this before, haven't you?
Jerry will also sign.
Oh,
Back, yeah.
okay, Board of Finance. I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1415-09 in the amount of $23,327.84.
Second.
Any discussion? No, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Tony, debt presentation.
I actually have a.
Oh, I moved it.
We have a little PowerPoint?
Yeah, so I'm going to, I'll pass these out. Just give me a few minutes.
I moved you on a little.
Pretty good, yeah? Thank you. If I talk here, can you pick me up here, or would you rather I sit at the?
Should be able to get it.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to take this opportunity to update, in light of the fact that we have a discussion about the town center, and we've done some significant borrowing lately, and have some additional projects being discussed in the capital plan. I wanted to just take this opportunity, as I do on occasion, to review our debt profile and help you to understand sort of where we fall in our debt, and how things look going out into the future. So there are two concepts here that I want to discuss. The first is long-term debt. So long-term debt would be the amount we actually owe in funds for various projects, which is currently for the town about $28 million. And that involves bonds that we've issued for the new fire station, open space, Beecher South roof, the library, and the public works facility most recently. That also includes notes that we have outstanding for the Woodbridge Country Club acquisition and the Beecher remediation. Additionally, we are responsible for our portion of the Amity overlapping debt, which is essentially Amity's debt at the percentage of the budget that we are responsible for. So as you can see, if you add the two together, it's over $40 million. Each year, we pay debt service on that outstanding debt. And the budget for next year for debt service is almost $2.6 million for, again, the projects which we discussed on the previous slide. In addition, there's no principal and interest payments for the Woodbridge Country Club, but there are no Beecher remediation payments yet because the project is not complete. So until the project is complete, the interest is paid for out of the project funds. Again, the town is responsible for the Amity overlapping debt service, which is about $1.4 million. So again, you can see just short of $4 million the town has in debt service that we are responsible for.
10% of our income.
So this chart tries to outline by year, and I'll explain how this works. It's, I think, a very informative chart to sort of give a snapshot of, we have the town existing bonds, which were some of the projects that you all are familiar with, and these are the payments that are outstanding for those projects. So you can see how they're, for instance, the Beecher refinance from '01, which is from '96, which is a 20-year bond, is paid off here. And Fire Station goes out to here. Additionally, we have the notes that are outstanding for the Country Club, which is here, and the Beecher renovation, which is here. So this is an estimate based on the current schedule for the project and when I felt that the project debt service would hit the town's finances. Additionally, I have the Amity overlapping debt service here, which actually the superintendent was speaking of earlier. So you can see that we have an increase here is a year that's the highest, which is about $4.7 million of our operation. Additionally, there's been some town debt under consideration. I tried to at least list the ones that have been talked about in some sort of detail. And the timing of this, of course, is up for discussion. My objective here was to try to include all of these projects in such a way where the total debt service here at the bottom is pretty level. And not to have any additional spikes out here, which when we get into some debt indicators, you'll see that we're pretty high at this point. So to illustrate that in graphical terms here, which sometimes might be easier to understand, this is our existing debt. So this is the existing debt we have obligations for currently. Again, just to reiterate, we have the Amity overlapping debt service, and just to recall that we're responsible for a portion of that overlapping debt, which is $1.4 million for debt service currently, and $13 million worth of debt. So add that to our chart. You can see it adds quite a bit to our curve. And then there's other proposed debt, which is other projects that have been discussed in our 6-year capital plan, which is why it's important when you have your 6-year capital plan to actually discuss those projects, because outside agencies look at your capital plan as those projects being what you are currently discussing or currently contemplating as part of your debt profile or your debt plan. So this figure here is just a placeholder. We don't really have a lot of detailed information on this, but I wanted to put something in here about the radio project because that has been discussed at several budget meetings. I did not want to leave that out. Again, these are up for discussion, but I want to just add some of these so that you'll see what we're looking at here. All of these projects are approved. Next is the former fire station renovation, and then there's police phase 1, phase 2, and finally open space, which is also currently in the capital plan. It's important to note that it's very important that you do not, when you see some of our, here's what that looks like graphically, by the way. So you can see how it fits into this profile here towards the outer end of the curve. A lot of times the rating agencies and outside agencies look at debt fiscal indicators. These are indicators that give you an idea of how you do certain metrics for how you're performing, how you compare with other towns. And I think it's very important that you do not borrow to capacity, because oftentimes in the past, I can think of two off the top of my head anyway, you can't always plan for everything that you think you're going to borrow for. I don't think the fuel spill is one. I don't think anybody anticipated borrowing for a fuel spill. And the country club's another. That was not in anybody's radar before that actually happened. So, so when you keep that in mind as we go through here, debt fiscal indicators are very important, and we have a debt policy which actually I think we're going to review. We review periodically. It's probably time to review that again, and some other policies that help to guide this process. The first is debt service as a percentage of your operating budget, and 10% is generally an industry standard that you should not go above unless you have some very extenuating or very difficult circumstances. But generally 10% is seen as a pretty hard ceiling. And in FY16 we're at 8.63. So you can see we're pretty high there. Debt per capita is another. And our debt per capita in FY16 is about a little under $4,200. Now, that's some communities, the debt is actually paid through commercial real estate, so it may be not as true as others where you have not as much of a commercial base, where the debt per capita may be closer to actually, having a higher real estate, residential real estate. And finally, the debt service is a percentage of net equalized grand list. These are three of the major ones. There's a lot of other ones that are considered, but these are the three that I wanted to highlight for tonight, and that's 2.46.
So, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On the debt per capita, is there a standard, a ceiling, something?
Yeah, actually, there is, and I'm going to go through
Okay.
the next couple of slides. Are going to show these in a little more detail. This is a percentage of the budget. So I took the chart you saw earlier and I extrapolated that out with an estimate or an assumption on a budgetary increase going out for 10 years, which is based on some of our historical averages. And you can see in this year here we're at 9.83%, so we're pretty close to 10% here. And that's with no new borrowings in these first few years. So that's something to keep in mind. As in comparison for you, the state average is 6.06. This is sort of what you were referring to. The state average is 6.06, and these are all AAA rated communities in Connecticut. So you can see that there are a few, New Canaan, Ridgefield, Weston, Westport, and Farmington, I think is the other one, that are, and here's Woodbridge on the end, that are above Woodbridge. And this is a snapshot in time, so these obviously all change for each community as years progress, but just gives you an idea of where we are with other similarly rated municipal communities. Second is direct and overlapping debt per capita. And again, you see we're at $4,200 there. And it does go down for a while, but then over here, there was slips up because of the new debt for some of the other newer projects, the police station, the radio, some of those other projects. So it comes back up a little, and our population doesn't grow all that fast a rate, so it sort of creeps up here in the outer years. Again, you'll see this is a state average is $2,200, so you can see we're quite a bit above the state average. Similar communities, New Canaan, Weston, and Westport are all above Woodbridge. New Canaan is almost $6,000, but we're pretty high here also. Finally, it's the direct and overlapping debt as a percentage of the grand list. And this is an indicator of your ability, your debt ability to absorb that debt burden. And you can see that some of those other communities have a larger grand list. And so their debt per equalized grand list, while higher in some other categories, is lower here. You can see Woodbridge here on the end. So, we have, for other, this is just one, one metric or one thing that's looked at. There's a lot of other factors that go into your fiscal health. This is just one, but I wanted to bring this to your attention because you can see that we're pretty high based on all the other communities. So, we borrowed for 2 major projects recently, and you can see that we're a AAA rated community, and that was after borrowing for those 2 larger projects. So the market and the rating agency have understood that. So it's where we are is fine.
Yeah.
It's just I wanted to give you an indicator as looking ahead that you should keep that in mind.
Where we are is fine, Tony, but it would seem to me we have very little to move up above where
That's
we are
sort of the point.
from where we are right now.
Right.
We're at the top. We're getting close to the top.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess we have to start to put on the brakes.
Some of these categories we're getting closer to the top, so for you to consider. I don't know if anyone has any questions or they want to look at something in more detail or something.
For people who might not be as familiar with this, getting near the top or going over it would affect our bond rating. Is that
Correct.
right? And do you want to explain a little bit about what the implications
So,
are?
every time we issue debt, we go for a rating review. And the bond rating is basically, we generally go to Moody's, and they look at several different aspects of your financial health. Debt is one, debt profile, which we just went through. And your bond rating determines how much you pay for your debt service. So that the lower your bond rating, the more you pay. It's because you're considered a greater risk to the extent we are a risk, or our community is a risk. And so they also look at fund balance levels, wealth levels in the community, whether it be tax collection rates and income levels and a whole bunch of different areas. Management practices, you making sure that you have solid budget practices, and we've done well in a lot of these areas. But that's what that would impact.
I think they've also commented that we manage our debt very well,
Right.
as far as
That's
not
correct.
taking on new debt.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Without retiring debt.
One major thing that I didn't include in here is debt payout, and we're about 60%. And so I think you have to be at least 50%, which that means that what percentage of your debt is paid out in the first 10 years of the program. And so we're about 60%. So we're about middle of the pack, a little higher, we're doing a little better. Some communities are closer to 50. So that goes to your paying out of debt earlier in the curve.
So we made a $6 million reduction in this long-term debt number. That's going
Correct.
to
It
make
changes all of these graphs.
changes all these variables and changes all these graphs.
Right.
Do you think there's something, Tony, that's happening with the grand list in the other comparative communities that's different than Woodbridge?
I think some of them have a bigger commercial base than we do. Some of them just have higher values than we do.
Right.
And so they're better able to withstand or to absorb the debt burdens here, as it says on the thing here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because some of these are pretty wealthy communities.
Right, they're wealthier
yeah.
communities, yeah.
Lawrence, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to make a joke.
Okay.
A couple slides ago.
use a joke.
Yeah, go for
A
it.
couple slides ago, when you showed how the debt burden was a function of the operating budget, I said, well, let's just grow the operating budget. But I decided not to say that.
That's very funny.
Glad you didn't say that.
But now while this slide is up, to follow up actually on what Sandy just asked, this indicator anyway is what drives many Connecticut cities and towns to try and grow the grand list, right? By bringing in a box store
Right.
or a strip mall or something like that.
Right.
And so, I guess in this indicator anyway, one way to bring Woodbridge more in line would be to try to grow its grand list. Am I?
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah, good,
Right.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely correct.
Tony, other than when you go for additional debt, are the bond ratings done annually, biannually? How do
You
they
can,
handle?
the bond rating is done, typically you get a rating review before you issue new debt, so that they can be priced accordingly by whoever wants to invest in the community. I suppose you can get one whenever you want. They do cost money though.
Yeah.
Do, so generally you do it when you're looking to issue new debt. It's a pretty involved process. There's a lot of details you have to put together, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of information.
So my question is about the Amity overlapping debt. So that's existing debt that is either from capital technological investment, or is it mostly the construction?
It's the construction.
And does it take into account some of the capital?
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't include any potential Amity debt because I wasn't sure if.
You did or didn't?
I did not.
Right. So this really
Well, I didn't
is
see much out there, right? Even
Yeah.
today, you didn't show much out there.
No.
This is
Technology.
all from the project that they
Yeah.
did for several years
So this
ago.
is construction,
Yeah.
because he did mention, I believe one of his sheets is that they're planning on bonding future
Right,
technology
I don't
purchases.
have that in here,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I didn't know if it included that.
I think if you think about the town and what we've done over the past 20 years, our schools are in great shape. I mean, the Amity schools are in terrific shape. Beecher, after this latest project, will be right where it should be. Compared to, a brand new fire department, the library is relatively new, public works, and we've kept up with our infrastructure, we've kept up with our buildings. There's not much in disrepair. Maybe the center needs some work.
Yeah.
But I think the town has, yes, we have debt, but we've kept our facilities in good shape. They're in good shape. We have a new building. I mean, I think at Bethany, the community school, that one little school they have, and they voted down a project that was needed. Orange, I can't ever say I've seen where they've done major renovations in any of their schools. Their schools are very tired. And Witness Peck Place School over there, they had a major problem where they had to move all the kids out to Bayer because the school just fell apart all of a sudden.
You might get some police officers coming in here who might
Yeah.
disagree with you about what the future
Well,
holds. But
but
that's
I
one
think
big
one
matzo
by
ball hanging
one,
out
we've
there.
taken everything up.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the building, and that's why we have the debt we have, but again, every time we get reviewed by Moody's or whatever, they're very complimentary, and of course, they look at the ability to pay and the strength of the taxpayers, the per capita, and we've never, they've always overlooked things because we're such a strong municipality.
But I think your point is we don't take on the debt if we can't
No.
afford to do it. So even though if there is a need, the need gets pushed off until the time that we can afford to pay for it.
And, a major hit to this was the country club, and as Tony said, it was on nobody's radar.
Nobody.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we have to see if we can turn it into something positive, but that's for future discussion. Hopefully, we can get out from under that and make it profitable. We'll see. But again, I attended a couple of those meetings. They're very high on Woodbridge. So. That's very good, though, Tony. It's good
Very,
to have.
very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Tony?
One more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tony,
Sure.
you said that our responsibility for the Amity overlapping debt is based on the percentage of the budget.
Correct.
But that changes every year.
Correct.
So does
I
our-
use the current rate, and I use the same rate going out
Okay,
into
so-
the future.
Okay.
It's
So but
changed,
that would
you know.
change.
It could change a little, but it's minimal.
Yeah.
There were
Yeah.
no major swings in the past decade or so.
You could write a big check, David, if you want to. That might help.
I can write it and we're doing good.
The cookie help.
Sweet.
Okay, number 5 is a review of the town center plan. Somebody here to...
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And all the members of the boards, both boards, have a packet of reports that have been done over the last several years about the different buildings and the plans for the town center. And I know I had some requests, perhaps Matt had also, people wanted to talk more about it, get some more in-depth history, particularly for those of us who are newer to it, to understand where we are and how we got there. And Brian Humes is the person who helped with a great deal of that, two of the key reports here with Brian's reports. So he's going to bring us up to speed on those, and then we'll open up the discussion.
Thanks for being here, Brian.
Thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Brian Humes from Jakunski Humes Architects. We're an architectural firm located in Berlin, Connecticut, and we have been working for a number of years on this police department project. But before I went right into the police station project, I had a meeting with Ellen and Tony, and it was the first time I had met Ellen, and was going over some of the projects that we have been working on in Woodbridge in the past, and she thought I should just mention the history that we have in the town. Some of your faces are familiar. I've been here before presenting, but some are new faces. We've been in Woodbridge, and the specialty in my office is public safety facility design. I've been doing public safety facility design for the last 30 years for my office, and for the last 15 years as Jakunski Humes Architects. And in 2005, we were first asked to come to Woodbridge, and at that time, it was to do a fire station study. When the first referendum had failed on the fire station, we were asked to come down and do a site analysis study and evaluate several different properties in town for the siting of a new fire station. And on that recommendation, it was January of 2005, we recommended the Fitzgerald property at that time for a new fire station, and that project went ahead. In 2009, we were then contracted to do a space needs assessment for the police department. And the space needs assessment dated June 2009 just described the overall needs of the facility, what the program requirements were, and we looked at the police facility as far as the 20-year growth potential. We looked at the growth potential for staffing projections, and we looked at population statistics and calls for service, and worked with the police department to come up with what it was that was needed. At this point,
that
yes.
report is number 5 in the packet.
Okay. At this point, this document did not identify whether there was a need for a new building or a renovation. It was just a report to say you have X number of square feet now, you're projected to need X number of square feet, and this documented how that growth was going to occur. But without a solution, it was just a report of needs, square footage needs. In 2010, we did a reuse study on the former fire station. So again, we were back in town, we were looking at what the potential use could be for the former fire station, and we gave a report and an analysis on that building in 2010.
Item number 4 in the packet.
In 2012, we were asked to take the space needs assessment and convert the needs into a renovation concept for the existing police station. And that's the floor plan that you see to the right on the board. It's a phase 1, phase 2 approach for the renovation of the center building. In October of 2012, these plans were sent out for a professional cost estimate, and we received a detailed document from a professional cost estimating firm out of Boston, which then estimated the costs, and with a lot of detail and breakdown. It was 15 pages, 16 pages long, detailing in every detail of the plan what the costs of construction would be. It's just a construction and site work professional estimate. We took the construction and site work estimate and then converted that into a total project cost estimate dated October 8th, 2012. And is that also in your packet?
I think I saw it, but I don't see it on the index.
I think it's under number 5.
Yeah, it's halfway through. Yeah, halfway through.
Okay. October 8th, 2012. That's the latest estimate that we've done on this project. So notice that it's dated 2012. That we've never been asked to escalate this, but in 2012, the costs for Phase 1 were projected for April of 2013, and Phase 2 costs were projected for April of 2015. So just to note the dates on those reports.
Frank, do you mind if I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
So just because you brought that up, just through your experience escalating costs 3-4 years down the line, let's say it'd be 4 years or 5 years down the line before, from 2012, before an actual building's built,
About 4% a year.
4% a year.
For the last few years, we've been seeing about 4% a year,
So if it's 5 years from 2012, we should look at 20%.
about 20% on average, yes.
Thank you.
The plan that was put together for the police department, the way this plan is oriented, the Phase 2 area, the long horizontal portion, is the area of the existing police station. The section of the plan that goes vertical to the left-hand side is only 1/2 of the center building facing the main road. We're looking to take the center building under Phase 1. And the concept of Phase 1 is to occupy half of the main floor space at the center building and convert the front door back into a front door. Give the front door the main entrance location for the police department, give it some handicapped accessibility, and have the police department have a public entrance on the main road on the face of the building. Right now, it's a little hard to find where the front door of the police department is for the public. This would then give a little new life to the building and a more identifiable entrance for the police department. The Phase 1 costs were estimated about $2 million, and included in that $2 million net was credited a $500,000 steep grant, which was granted to Woodbridge by the state of Connecticut. And that steep grant was obtained for this use for the police department. So that is an earmarked grant for this project, and I think it was obtained back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was around the time that we were preparing this. So in 2012, you had received it at that time. So without the grant, the costs were more like $2.5 million. We credited the grant that was received, and you're about $2 million.
Is there an expiration date on that grant? Is there
It's 2018.
2018?
And it doesn't, just so clear about the grant, is you do not need to spend, all we need to do to be able to use the grant is to spend $500,000. We don't have to spend anything more than that to use the grant, if that's clear. In other words, we don't have to spend $5 million in order to get the $5
So if we spend $500,000 by 2018, we can get the grant.
Right.
Thank you.
Also included in that $2 million Phase 1 are a lot of improvements to the building itself, the center building itself. When we looked at that, where the existing gym was, the condition of the exterior windows, there's some water infiltration issues on getting into the basement of the center building. There's a lot of issues with the mechanical system in the center building, which at that time in 2012 was aging and needed to be repaired. So not all the costs in Phase 1 were just police department related items. There were a lot of building infrastructure items that were being addressed in Phase 1 that would have needed to be addressed, whether it was going to be renovated for police department or just continued use of the building. I know the water getting into the basement was causing issues of dampness in the basement. Those issues are still there, I assume, today. And whether it's a renovation of the police department or just any upgrade or upkeep of that building, you should be aware that that building does need improvements. in all of its mechanical, electrical, plumbing, water infiltration, exterior windows are very inefficient. So a lot of those costs, if you look at it, it's $2 million for just that portion for the police department. Well, yes and no. A lot of it is bringing that building back to a more usable condition and providing handicapped accessibility to 2 floors in that area of the center building. It does include, in that Phase 1 renovation, emergency dispatch communication center. So that's going into that Phase 1 area. And the way we have phased this is if Phase 1 gets completed, areas from the existing building could then relocate into Phase 1, allowing areas to be able to be renovated then under Phase 2. So we're moving into Phase 1, all the administrative offices for the police department. We're moving records division, and we're moving dispatch, and we're moving all the public in the green area. It's all the public access, and locating a classroom for training, not just for police use, but it could be a classroom for town use. It's a handicapped accessible meeting room for use by the town for meetings. Accessible from the police department, but also accessible from other areas of the center building. So if we're moving those major components into Phase 1, that frees up a lot of space in Phase 2, where renovations could be done in vacated space. Departments could be moved into those newly renovated areas. The area of detention and prisoner processing in Sallyport, that's going to remain where it is now. There may be some reciprocal arrangements with neighboring towns during that renovation. A lot of communities in the vicinity can accommodate detention needs, prisoner processing needs during times of renovation. That's happened for a lot of different communities we're working in the state. So don't think you would be without detention or without prisoner processing, but it could be done on a temporary basis with neighboring communities when that time comes. There could be a solution. But that's the red area. That red area is just renovating existing detention, existing prisoner processing space.
So, Brian, if I hear what you're saying, one of my questions for a while now has been, did you look at, or would you consider looking at a new building based on the cost? But if I hear what you're saying, irregardless of if we could do a new building at a similar cost, this building would need a substantial amount of upgrade, regardless of whether it was a police station or not.
That is correct. And those costs are built into what you're seeing here. It's just under a heading that says police department on it, but it's really, it's building infrastructure and improvements. When it's done, Phase 1 and Phase 2 would then come back and satisfy the June 2009 document for needs assessment. This being a 20-year projected growth, and without seeing a lot of additional growth within the town of Woodbridge, we're saying this is a 20-plus year renovation. This could be the last police renovation you're going to have to do in Woodbridge for a very long time. Just because we're seeing pretty stable population, we're seeing stable crime rates. What this is achieving is years and years and years of overcrowding because of the growth that you've already encountered. It's not so much because we're seeing a lot of new growth put on top of this. So that's another thing to note. But whenever it comes to renovate a police department, and I've done over 60 of them now in my career, this building type is the hardest building type to get approved through the town. And there are for reasons for that. One is, for the police department, there's not a large constituency in town that's going to come out and say, yes, we understand the need for this, and we understand why our taxes need to go up, and we understand why we need to take on debt for the police department. There's not that connection with the citizens for a police department. People understand a school, they can understand a library, they can understand DPW for some sense, but they can't understand the police department because there is a sense that they're supposed to be on the road. We'll buy them cars, we don't need to buy them a building. Well, that mentality is just not accurate. And while the fire department might have a large constituency because they're volunteer and local, that's not always true for the police department. And the police department aren't the ones to necessarily stand up and advocate for their own facility. There are liabilities that are existing there. The conditions in that building, I see them. I've documented it, but I'm not reporting on your liabilities. They exist. The police department know they exist, but we're not writing a report on them. The conditions that you have there should be addressed on the issue of safety. Your police department goes out and tries to make this community the safest it can be, and they come back to a facility which is then unsafe for them. It's unsafe for the visitors that are visiting, the public. The public now, when they have to go to a meeting for the police commission, they need to go through the entire police department. That's not a safe condition, because you don't know who's going to be along that corridor when you're within the police department. There could be prisoners, there could be detainees. The police staff have to come in and handle those people in confined spaces, and it's not a safe condition. We're trying to rectify that. What we find community after community after community is the only way these projects get done is political will. And that's what you are. You have to understand the need for this to make it happen, or it won't. So I just add that just on my experience doing this. There are conditions that need to be improved upon, just building conditions, let alone safety. But I'm here primarily to talk to you about safety and making it a safer environment for your officers. So.
Can I ask you, as our resident expert, in your opinion, this study was done 2010, 2012, somewhere in that. How close, how immediate of a need, as our expert?
Well, I can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think you're on borrowed time as far as the potentials that you have there for liability. In your detention areas, there are very definite liabilities. It could take one accident, and I'm not hoping for that or projecting that, but I'm saying the liability is there.
Brian, does phase one address safety issues?
It does, because it separates the public from the staff and detainee prisoner processing areas. By creating just phase one, we're creating a public lobby where the public can come into in a safe environment. The public then have access to a classroom. And one of the things the police department are trying to promote is community policing, bringing the community into their department so they can do citizen police academies, so they can engage the public, they can have events where they can open their staff to integrate and cooperate with the public in their facility. This gives them the opportunity to do that in a safe environment. Police commission meetings. If the police commission meetings can now be held in that classroom, public can come and go in a safe environment. They can greet the public in that public forum. Freedom of information issues are more obtainable because now there's public access. There's public restroom facilities, all separated off from the operations of the police department. Just that issue alone identifies one of your main liabilities over there. Any public meetings that they have right now, if you're not aware, the public meeting room is here. The public entrance is here. So getting to a meeting, you don't know who's being interviewed, you don't know who's being detained, who's being processed, and who's being interviewed. You may be walking along this corridor, and you may see somebody who's a victim, completely innocent, but maybe they don't want to be seen. Maybe it's somebody who's had a domestic issue that's in there trying to be confidential. You're walking people right by them.
Did you consider an entrance that would go directly to the public meeting room as a maybe temporary but less expensive way to achieve the goal of getting to the meeting room?
The meeting room's down here. There is another public entrance, This comes from a restricted access from staff-only parking. So your public parking right now is at this location. So we need to get the public from this location to a meeting room. So the current condition is, this is restricted access, this is staff, this is your Sally Port entrance for prisoner processing, detainees. In this condition, new public handicapped access to the entry to the center building, entry into a public lobby, entry into a community meeting training room, access to dispatch, access to records, all from one central public lobby.
So
The
Brian,
building actually works out pretty well in that regard.
To follow up with Alan's question, phase one would accomplish quite a few things for us, according to you. How long, in your estimation, would it take for phase one from the start date to be completed?
I think I did have an estimate on that. I have an estimate of 5 months for phase one. The estimate on phase two was 6 months.
And basically what happens with this plan, Brian, is they continue to utilize all the space they currently have, and then we're giving them the space that would be vacated by recreation in the 2 exercise rooms and several of the other meeting spaces.
That is correct. That is correct. During phase one, there's no difference in the operation of the police department. It would continue to operate as it operates today. In all the area of phase one would be vacated space suitable for renovation. Now, I did note in 2012, I did talk with the facilities manager at the time who was taking care of that building. And in 2012, he was talking to me about all the deficiencies in the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, insulation values, energy efficiency issues. So that's, I don't know if anything has been done since 2012, but that was the conversation I had then.
Can you speak to the impact on the human services offices?
Mhm.
I don't.
The human service, as I said, this is the center door, and so human services happens at this part of the plan. So there have been some renovations that have been done in that area of the building. What we see outside of this red line would be not in scope, and that's area that's already been occupied, renovated. What would be gained in this is they would also have use of this meeting room. This meeting room, it's a classroom, but it would also be set up for your emergency operations center. So in a time of an emergency, they could gather all town departments, but there's a meeting room there that could be scheduled for anybody's use in that building.
I seem to recall when we met, you said it would also result in the loss of some rooms for human services. That's not the case. Oh, good.
No, only the rooms that you see. I don't know if this is a classroom now. I don't know how this gets scheduled now, but that's an existing. It is a classroom now. The only thing we're adding to it is an EOC area, but that's an existing room.
So
There
what
may be scheduling of that room. I'm not sure.
So what does get displaced? The fitness?
Yeah,
The fitness, right? Basically the fitness.
And
Which
then
is-
the meeting rooms,
And a
like
couple of
meeting
meeting rooms.
16.
And a
And,
couple,
These two are fitness.
right.
okay.
And then that's meeting room was right above, one of them is a meeting room, room 16, I think we call it, yeah, on that
Yeah,
side.
these two are they were vacated meeting rooms.
And aren't those rooms used by some of the services that come in from out of town for human services? I'm thinking about the service that helps with the schools and the psychology.
I'm not sure.
Well, what is happening with where facilities moved out across the hall from human services? Does human services get that space?
They were taking that.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's additional space for them.
And that's still above, because
It's
that
all
one
on
was
that, yeah.
right above that top blue on the right-hand
In
side.
2012, rooms were not used. The only thing that was used were the fitness rooms.
But they're looking for more space, which I'm not.
In addition.
In addition, so I'm not
Correct.
quite clear how that would all.
Right, that's.
Right.
I'm just wondering if you could segue from talking about the recreation area to the old firehouse.
Yeah.
And what you had recommended there.
Yeah.
That will help give us a connected picture of some of the things we're talking about.
We looked and tried to analyze that building and trying to determine what's the highest and best use. And it was being used for fire department use when we were there, but the fire department had just moved into a new facility. So now what was being planned? We, in our recommendation back in 2010, recommended that building be turned into a recreation center for fitness use. That tied into taking the fitness center from this building into the firehouse, and also utilizing the second floor of that building for meeting space, and could be an extension of that recreation center. If there were yoga classes or any fitness classes, it would give them a place to have fitness instruction in addition to a fitness center. So it was more turned into recreational and recreation use for fitness.
Ellen, do you mind if I follow up to that?
Sure.
So, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, and to Ellen's point, sounds like you're saying we have to do something to create that home, create a new space for the fitness center and the places that are going to be displaced first, so that we can create the space available for phase one.
You'd have to relocate that fitness center before this was undertaken somehow, somewhere. And I think in Tony's analysis, he actually placed the fitness center, the former firehouse project, in the same time frame as.
It was a little
advanced
Yeah.
of this project.
Right.
But then that means that we have to vacate the old firehouse with
Shed.
that's being stored.
Back to
So
the
there's all
shed.
these
It's a domino
effects.
theory of
Yes.
move Bay
when-
2 and Bay 3 and.
Yeah. When you did this plan, was the shed project, which I think is what we're getting around to, which is the fire department feels is necessary so that they can vacate the old firehouse so that we can move this fitness center and so on and so forth. Was that contemplated and is that still in your?
It is in my former firehouse study of 2010 that what the fire department needs to store would be more efficient on their property than in that former firehouse. We also looked at the basement of the new firehouse to determine if their storage needs could be satisfied in the basement of the new building. And it was just, it wasn't a solution because of the types of things they need to store. The basement setting was not a good condition for what they needed to get access to. So we were recommending that an auxiliary storage building be built at the site of the new firehouse. That's also in our report.
Page 34 and 35.
Right,
You see where the dominoes are starting to fall.
Yeah, that's
what I just said, right.
But I could be wrong, my understanding is the existing shed would be insufficient for the fire folks' needs if the old firehouse was exclusively recreation. In other words, they didn't have any use, they didn't get any use for that. The shed that was on that pad there contemplated is not sufficient for their storage needs.
Well,
That's my understanding, I don't know if that's true.
It would
or
not include.
The
it
original
certainly-
request for the shed was a $180,000 investment with the footprint. Somehow that thing has grown from $180,000 to $350,000.
Right.
I mean, what the Board of Finance approved is nothing what is on the drawing board today.
But I think I understand that, but I guess I'm struggling with even what they contemplate, whether it's in addition, I'm told it's not enough.
They
need
originally
one day
wanted
or-
25,000 square feet.
Yeah,
They were given 20,000 square feet.
right,
At that very moment, they said, we're going to be coming back, because it's not enough.
right.
So they need 5,000 square feet more. That shed is not going to be anywhere near.
That's my point, so,
So they were going to still maintain at least one bay, or was it two bays over at the old firehouse for, I thought,
Bay one.
the truck, the and a few
The
other.
antique, that's been.
Right.
big
So I
one.
think we're merely saying if we followed Brian's recommendation and kicked the fire folks out of there totally and made it fully, exclusively recreation, fitness,
We need a bigger
there's a problem with fire storage, so.
As I understand it, it was never contemplated that the antique fire truck would be moved. I'm not sure about that.
That's what I was
But, the reason Brian is here, because we tried to put together all the reports that we could find, and the only available author of any of the reports is Brian. So he does not have all the information we need, but he has some really important parts of it. And I think it raises the different questions that we've been talking about.
Well, and it's not so much that we make any decisions, obviously, tonight about anything, but rather that we all get our institutional memory sort of on the same level, because we're all parts of different boards at different times,
Right.
correct? So that way we somewhat level that playing field.
And also if there are questions and follow-up. So one is to clarify the position of the fire department with respect to needs that are currently being met in the old firehouse and to what extent they'll be met in the shed. And I don't think we actually have a detailed proposal for the shed, so, is that right, Tony?
Right, yeah.
So, to
I mean, there were a
Is that,
couple of designs that Joe Rayola did, but I don't know if he really did that in consultation with the fire department.
that
was
would be
the
important.
issue, yes.
That would be important.
But I think
So-
the other thing to clarify is that for Bay 1 and the antique fire truck, I think there was discussion about keeping it there, but making it more of a museum so that as a public space, the whole building is public space. It's not just storage for fire department equipment and closed off to the public. So I think that still exists and should, be on the table as one of the ideas.
And I would like to hear back from the fire department as far as between the shed that's proposed and the footprint that's there now and one bay, is that going to be, at least in their opinion, sufficiently their needs? That's
Yeah, well, and I guess Tony gave us the nice tech presentation, which was great, and we know that folks are looking for a project at the old firehouse, and we know the firemen are looking for the shed. I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not advocating anyway, but, and we know the police are looking for this. So I guess my question is, now that we're bringing this to the fore and we're all getting refreshed, or some of us learning for the first time, whatever that may be, are we gonna develop some strategic plan to try to figure this? I mean, how do we work, what do we do going forward?
Well,
Because,
phase one implementation is going to key another $1 million for the dispatch center. On top of the $2 million for the equipment. That's estimated to be close to $1 million to do that, isn't it?
You're talking about the radio system?
The radio system?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you do phase one, and that new dispatch centers go in there, they're putting all the new equipment in there,
right.
that's going to key a need for another $1 million
Yeah.
to complete that. So,
We're
where are we going to be?
bumping up.
How-
Yeah, and
Where are we going to be bumping up
That
against?
service right now.
And if the old firehouse is done around the same time to free up the fitness center and that type of thing, I believe that's still another $1 million that,
1.3 million.
So,
So I guess maybe we need
So
some
how
sort
much-
of
We need a lot of
concept
bake
plan.
sales to make this happen.
Lottery
$5
tickets.
$6 million?
So I guess the first question is additional information. We have some questions about the fire department needs. I think if there are other questions, that would be very good to get them to Tony so that we can get the information that we need for it. I think we do have a lot of information. We've got good updated data about where we are with respect to our debt and where we think we can go. And we can talk about it from there. Maybe Tony can talk about a plan. I think to some extent, he's shown us where we can start plugging in additional debt, given where we are. That's a base for it, unless we want to make some kind of radical change and agree to go above the 10% limit.
right.
That's something we could talk about.
can I ask one additional
Yeah,
question?
sure.
Maybe we can get more information, maybe from the recreational department or maybe others. But from what I'm hearing Brian say, as far as displacement goes, to get to phase one, what's really the base of it is the fitness center. And so that we don't have to talk, or maybe do it simultaneously, the old firehouse, is there another place, maybe at least temporarily, where the fitness center could go, so that we wouldn't have to do both projects at the exact same time. So maybe we could hear from Recreation
But the
or.
fitness center, Tony, should only take up one bay. I mean, the fitness center is not.
No, I think they.
No,
Anybody
they
want
It's
the-
it's actually.
They said they needed
Two
bay
bays?
2
They
and
now
bay
it's
3.
two bays?
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
I,
their
you know,
two bays.
I'm just saying, is it
Think how
possible
the way
that there's
Grove
another
is,
home
okay.
temporarily
Right, but
anyways,
it's not the-
why it's
it's
being
not the whole
done?
firehouse.
Just to see if we can defer
No,
We
something.
can find out, maybe there's something else.
I'm gonna drop it after this, but I think what I'm suggesting is, rather than look at this as a police department project, the old firehouse, I think we should look at this as a town center project.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely. I agree with you.
And
Oh, yeah.
because use a domino effect, you
Right.
do one thing and then you
Absolutely.
spend all this money and then something else.
But it's
so-
gotta be phased.
Right, well,
into
you gotta have an
a total
overall plan, if
Yeah.
you wanna phase it in, that's all fine, but I think we have to work towards an
Yeah,
overall
it is a
plan.
domino.
Other than what we just talked about, Joe, is there some other way you'd like to approach it? That you
No.
thought about, or?
Well, I mean, maybe, I hate to use the word committee, but I mean, someone owning this and someone who has to gather this information, you know, because we said, well, you know, give us your input and so forth, which is great, but we all kind of go our ways after that. Maybe someone who's gonna own it and who's gonna talk to the fire folks and find out exactly what they need, you know, and then talk to Dwight Rowland, and, you know, he has that proposal for the old firehouse. You know, and we keep, it comes and it comes and it goes and it comes, but at this point, I think it's here and we have to gather all this information from the stakeholders and figure out what they need and then come up with some kind of a plan for all this.
And to that point, you mentioned that Brian was one of the authors of this plan. Are there any other authors or people that we could talk to that were part of this that maybe you feel were not, that Brian doesn't have input to?
I didn't identify anyone else in these reports. Some of them are pretty
There were-
old.
There were other
but-
committees, and there were people
But
who
there have been-
identified on the committee.
Right, and I
And
don't
we've
think we
told-
want to, we don't want to
No.
reinvent
it's
the wheel.
not-
And that's why I think
no.
once you look at these, there is a great deal of information. So,
Yes,
you know,
I would
maybe
agree.
when we get a little bit farther along in the budget and Tony has some time, we can talk about it and see what might be helpful.
And my only-
Brian is correct. The police department doesn't have any advocates,
Of course. But
okay? Everybody else has an
I think
advocate.
that's true, yeah.
And when we talk about needs, it's the fire departments, education.
You're right.
They do not have an advocate.
I agree, and I think they have needs.
that,
First one to
I
agree
think that,
they have
you know, they probably need an advocate, you know, and they deserve to have this space looked at. They deserve to have serious consideration for this.
And to your point
Okay?
earlier,
And maybe they should, you know, they need an advocate. He's correct, they do.
to your point earlier, and maybe this is somebody we could include on seeing and talking to, because we discussed it once before, was this Julie Rybold, because we're going back and talking about this radio need, and if phase one is gonna have the radio, I'd like to kind of hear from some expert, which seems like, I guess, her
Well,
company,
Well, on the radio, we do have a committee.
We're
Susan
working
and
on-
Dave
we're
are
working on
working
that.
and then they'll report to us, or,
Right.
yeah,
But
that'd be great.
I couldn't harass Tony too much this week because he's got his hands full, but we're at a stage now where we're gathering another level of information. And,
right.
you know, I personally am not dying to spend $1 million, so I don't
Right.
feel like it's gotta happen tomorrow, but we will have something in the next couple of weeks, obviously.
That'll be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Brian? Anything else on this?
Have any money?
Thank you for coming back.
$500,000 grant we helped you get.
Yeah. Thank you for coming back and
Thank you.
sharing all of your
Thank you
time
very
with
much.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
That's it? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?